Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we're trying to take all that complex information flying around and, really distill it down into what you actually need to know. Our goal here is always to give you some actionable insights, maybe some surprising facts that stick with you. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into the turbulent world of cybersecurity. It just never stops changing. We're going to unpack some pretty serious recent revelations, things like critical flaws in software lots of people use, and also the really insidious nature of supply chain attacks. It's definitely a lot to take in, but we're here to help you navigate it. Because honestly, staying informed, staying protected online, it's not really optional anymore, is it? It's just essential. And speaking of security, staying protected. This deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're a recognized leader in things like enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions too. So if you're looking for genuinely secure storage, maybe ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly offers air-gapped and immutable solutions really designed to protect your most vital data against, well, pretty much anything. You can contact sales at stonefly.com. That's sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo, see how they can help fortify your own digital setup. All right, let's get into it then. This digital battlefield, it just feels like it's expanding every single day. And the sheer volume, the number of new cybersecurity vulnerabilities popping up, it really feels like a constant game of whack-a-mole, just this relentless stream of threats demanding our attention, demanding we adapt. The industry uses these identifiers, CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures, basically just standard names for known flaws. And lately, wow, that list has just been exploding with really critical findings.
Yeah, it's quite striking. And it's not just the number, though the number is high. It's the critical nature of so many of these recent ones. We're definitely seeing a clear pattern. High-severity flaws, the kind that, if they're exploited, could give attackers really deep access. Sometimes even, full control over systems. These aren't just minor bugs. They represent some really fundamental weaknesses that need immediate attention. And we need to understand kind of the underlying causes, too.
Okay, so let's start digging into some of these critical ones. When we talk about things like critical remote code execution, RCE, or major access flaws, we're basically talking about vulnerabilities that let attackers take command of a system they shouldn't have access to. Often leads to a complete takeover.
Exactly. That's often the worst-case scenario for any organization.
So one really standout example recently is a major vulnerability in Veeam backup and replication. The identifier is CVE-2025-1568, and it has this staggering CVSS score, 9.9 out of 10. That's about as critical as it gets. What it does is allow remote code execution, but specifically for any authenticated domain user, if the backup servers are joined to an Active Directory domain. Now, why is that so concerning? Well, Veeam is huge in data protection. For countless organizations, it's their safety net, their last line of defense against data loss, against ransomware.
Right.
So compromising the backup system itself, that means attackers could potentially encrypt the backups, delete them, make recovery totally impossible. This vulnerability basically turns that safety net into a direct path for attackers to take over. It's incredibly dangerous. So for IT admins out there, the advice is, well, it's urgent. Immediately review your Veeam setup, prioritize patching, especially if those servers are tied into Active Directory. You have to secure that lifeline.
That's such a critical point. Because backup systems are, they're supposed to be isolated, right? That untouched recovery point.
Yeah.
A flaw that allows RCE directly on that last defense, it just fundamentally undermines the whole data protection strategy. And it highlights a common issue, actually. Even highly specialized critical software can have these vulnerabilities with really far-reaching consequences, often because of how they interact with, the wider enterprise stuff like Active Directory.
Absolutely. And here's another big RCE vulnerability, also scoring 9.9. This one's in Trend Micro Apex Central. It's actually two CVEs, CVE 2025-49219 and CVE 2025-49220. These are pre-authentication RCE flaws, which means, well, attackers don't even need login details to exploit them.
Yeah.
The problem comes from something called insecure deserialization in versions below 8.0.7007. But simply, insecure deserialization. It's when a program takes data from somewhere it shouldn't trust, maybe the internet, and when it tries to rebuild an object from that data, it accidentally runs malicious code hidden inside. The pre-authentication part here is what makes it so incredibly critical. It just removes that first barrier, the need for credentials. So attackers can potentially hit systems directly from the internet, no prior access needed. That makes mass exploitation much easier, much more attractive for threat actors. And that's precisely why organizations using Trend Micro Apex Central really need to get that patch applied, like yesterday.
Yeah, the persistence of insecure deserialization flaws.
Yeah.
It's a really significant kind of systemic issue in software development. It really is. It's a classic example of improper input handling,
Yeah.
where the trust you place in incoming data is just fundamentally flawed. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture of critical RCEs, well, many of these, like the Veeam one, the Trend Micro ones, they often stem from a mix of basic coding errors, how apps process data, and sometimes that's combined with misconfigured defaults or just inadequate access controls that don't limit the potential damage. Attackers are always looking for the path of least resistance to get full control, right?
Uh-huh.
And these kinds of RCEs, they offer exactly that.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Let's talk about vulnerabilities that mess with identity and access management. Basically the ones that unlock the digital doors that are supposed to keep us safe. A prime example here. A remote authentication bypass found in Teleport Community Edition. The ID is GHSA 8CQV-PJ7PWPC CVSS score 9.8. Very high. This affected version is up to 17.5.1. Now, Teleport, it's this powerful access plane. It's designed to provide secure connections, authentication, access controls for really complex infrastructure. Kubernetes clusters, SSH servers, databases, you name it.
It manages access.
Exactly. So a remote authentication bypass in that kind of system, that's a direct hit to the core security. It means the very gateway meant to secure access is itself compromised, potentially letting unauthorized users into really critical systems. And what made this particularly alarming when it was disclosed was, while there wasn't an immediate open source patch available, users were kind of left exposed for a bit.
Oh,
Yeah. It just highlights the severe risk when a tool designed specifically for security has a fundamental flaw in its main job.
That's a textbook case, isn't it? A system designed to secure access ironically becomes the way in. And the fact that Teleport is used to centralize all that identity and access stuff, any flaw in its authentication is just extraordinarily dangerous. It's not just one system getting compromised. It's potentially like the master key to your whole infrastructure.
And here's a really insidious one, a vulnerability in Ubuntu Auth. That's CVE-2025-1568. Score is 7.5. So high, not critical. But listen to this. This flaw involves a temporary user record. When a new user logs in for the very first time via SSH, they're temporarily considered part of the root group in that SSH session context.
Wait, what? Root group?
Yep, root access. Think about that. A brand new user, just by logging in through SSH, could suddenly gain the highest possible privilege on an Ubuntu system.
That's unexpected.
It's exactly the kind of unexpected privilege escalation that keeps admins up at night. We saw discussions online about this. People just couldn't believe how easy it was. And the speed at which public proof of concepts, the demos showing how to exploit it, the speed they emerged was really alarming.
Yeah, that indicates active interest.
For sure. Suggests a high chance of active exploitation attempts. It really underlines how seemingly minor temporary logic flaws can have just catastrophic security consequences.
That Ubuntu auth flaw,
Yeah.
it's a stark reminder of the dangers of implicit trust and unverified states and systems.
Right.
The system just momentarily grants way too many privileges based on a temporary condition, opening up this window for exploitation. And it also speaks to the broader problem, the one we keep seeing. Default credentials and misconfigurations. Consider the Siemens Energy Services vulnerability, CVE-2025-1568. This involved hard-coded default admin credentials in the LSpec G5 digital fault recorder component.
Oh, defaults again.
Again, it's a classic, yet still incredibly dangerous security mistake.
Hard-coded defaults just let attackers waltz in, gain control of critical devices, potentially tamper with outputs. The advice here is, well, it's timeless but urgent. Always change default usernames and passwords on any new device, any new software. And for devices connected to critical infrastructure like energy systems, you always need to isolate them from the internet. Restrict access only to trusted internal networks. The fact that such a basic flaw keeps showing up, especially in specialized industrial control systems, which are increasingly targets for, nation states, sophisticated criminals, it's deeply concerning.
Okay, let's pivot now. Web application flaws, software component flaws, these are often seen as the bread and butter for attackers, right? Just because they're everywhere.
Absolutely. So pervasive. A really relevant example here is Roundcube Webmail. They had CVE 2025-49113, a critical RCE flaw. What's fascinating and kind of insidious about this one is that this vulnerability, it comes from insecure PHP deserialization. It was exploitable after someone logged in. And get this, it was hidden in the code for over 10 years because of a single character error.
10 years, wow.
10 years, think about that. A tiny, seemingly harmless mistake in a super popular webmail client went totally undetected for a decade, just waiting. It really underscores how subtle coding mistakes can have huge long-term security implications. And as a powerful reminder about patching old flaws, there was an older SQL injection vulnerability in Roundcube CVE 2025-1568. It recently led to a data breach at coq.ai, exposed over 1 million user
Oh,
records.
yeah, I saw that.
So it just illustrates, even if a vulnerability is known for years, if it's not patched diligently everywhere, it's still a massive threat, often leads to real-world data breaches.
The round cube deserialization flaw really highlights several things, doesn't it? It's not just the coding error itself, but also maybe the inadequacy of security reviews to catch something so subtle yet critical over such a long time, and the coq.li breach. Yeah, that's a grim reminder that the digital graveyard of unpatched vulnerabilities, it's a fertile hunting ground for attackers. They don't always need 0 days, those brand new unknown flaws. Often they just need targets that haven't kept up with basic security hygiene. Which brings up an important question. Why do we keep seeing these same fundamental types of vulnerabilities pop up again and again, even in widely used software or even cutting-edge tech?
That's a great question. Why do we keep facing the same issues?
Well, I think it speaks to a systemic challenge, a challenge in how software is actually developed and maintained. Many of these common vulnerabilities we see: insecure deserialization, like we mentioned, improper input validation, default credentials still being a thing. They're often rooted in fundamental design and coding practices that just haven't been fully hardened across the board.
Yeah.
There's often this disconnect, between the secure coding principles we know and consistently applying them in complex, fast-paced development environments.
Yeah.
And it also points to the challenge of managing all those third-party components, the open source libraries everyone relies on. For instance, look at the critical vulnerability in TiEye. That's a Python library designed to turn PostgreSQL into a retrieval engine for RAG and agentic applications.
Yeah.
Cutting-edge AI stuff.
Right, the AI space.
Exactly. This library, crucial for many new AI apps, allowed the exfiltrate, the theft of all secrets used in one workflow, including the GitHub token, with write permissions for the repository.
Great permissions. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So an attacker could tamper with basically everything in the repository, push arbitrary code. This isn't just a bug. It's a foundational weakness in a component that's literally building the future. It shows that even these new paradigms like AI, they inherit and sometimes even amplify these classic security problems.
Okay, so we've just waded through this landscape full of individual flaws. Now let's zoom right in. Let's focus on one specific vulnerability that gives us a truly chilling look at the future of cyber threats. This one is called GerriScary. And it's not just about a bug in the code, no. This is about a profound breach of trust. Trust in the very process of how software gets built and distributed. It strikes right at the heart of the supply chain.
Yeah. GerriScary, yeah. Its formal name is CVE-2025-1568, and is precisely a supply chain compromise vulnerability. Its target was particularly significant: Google Gerrit. Now, for folks who might not know, Gerrit is this open-source web-based tool for code collaboration and review. It's used very widely across the industry, including, crucially, by Google itself, for many of its most critical internal projects. The core issue with GerriScary was, well, it allowed unauthorized code submission. Basically, it let malicious actors inject harmful code into at least 18 major Google projects.
18. Wow, which ones?
Yeah, including really foundational, highly visible ones. Things like Chromium, that's the base for Chrome, Edge, lots of browsers. ChromiumOS Dart, the language for Flutter apps. And Bazel, Google's main build engine. What makes it so terrifying isn't that attackers found some hidden backdoor. No, it's that they exploited inherent trust mechanisms, process flaws within a system that really should have been secure. They managed to slip malicious code into what everyone thought was a trusted pipeline. And that affects millions of users downstream who rely on these projects every single day. It fundamentally challenges our assumptions, about the integrity of the software we use, even when it comes from big trusted vendors.
Okay, so how did this incredibly sophisticated attack actually work? Because you said it wasn't like a brute force hack.
Right, it was more subtle, a kind of dance, exploiting specific permissions and very precise timing.
So the first key element was a misconfiguration in Gerrit's default addPatchSet permission. By default, this permission allowed any registered user, anyone who signed up, to modify existing code change suggestions.
Any user.
Any registered user. Imagine having a shared document like a Google Doc, and anyone who creates an account can not only suggest edits, but actually go in and change other people's already approved suggestions.
Okay, yeah, that sounds bad.
That's basically what this permission allowed by default in Gerrit. Attackers abuse this to quickly push a modified, often malicious patch onto a change that had already been approved by legitimate developers. That was step one, the foot in the door.
That addPatchSet misconfiguration, it's just a prime example of failing to stick to the principle of least privilege, isn't it? A system designed for collaboration accidentally gave way too much power, making it a critical way in for malicious code.
Exactly. Then, building on that, there was this crucial copy conditions logic flaw. Many of the vulnerable Google projects had their Gerrit setups configured to automatically copy approval labels. Things like code review +2, meaning 2 developers okayed the code, or commit queue +2, meaning it's ready for the system to automatically merge it.
Right, the approval flags.
Yeah. They copied these labels from previous version, or patch sets, to new revisions. Here's the critical part. This copying happened even if the underlying code in the new revision had changed.
Oh.
So a legitimate code change gets all the approvals. Then an attacker injects malicious code into a new patch set for that same change. But because of this copy conditions thing, the approval status just carried over. The system didn't trigger a fresh review of the modified code.
Wow, so the approval stuck even when the code was different.
Exactly.
That copy conditions flaw
Yeah.
is a classic example of like an implicit trust vulnerability within a workflow. The system just assumed, hey, the previous version was approved, so any minor updates must be fine too, without demanding a fresh security check. It completely undermines the whole point of code review, really.
Yeah.
Creates this window where new, unreviewed code could just slip past.
And then the final piece, the truly insidious part that ties it all together, the race condition timing. Gerrit uses automated bots, right, like the commit queue bot. These bots automatically merge code changes once they get certain labels, like that commit queue +2
Yeah.
automation. The race window was the critical, often tiny delay, the time between when a change got the commit queue +2 vote and when the bot actually merged it into the main code base. This window could be minutes, maybe 5 minutes in ChromiumOS and Dart repos, or sometimes just seconds in other Google projects.
Seconds, that's tight.
Very tight. Attackers with precise timing would constantly scan or scrape for changes that had just received that commit queue +2 vote. Then they'd use that addPatchSet permission to inject their malicious code just before the bot merged it, completely bypassing any reevaluation that might have happened that the system paused to recheck the new patch set.
Whoa. So they timed it perfectly to slip in right before the merge.
Perfectly. So what does this whole sequence mean for you listening? It means an attacker could submit a normal-looking update, get it approved by real developers. Then, in a flash, using that default permission and hitting that tiny race window, they could sneak in a malicious update. Because of the copy conditions flaw, the automated system just merged the malicious code into the official project before anyone even noticed.
That's, yeah.
It's a masterclass in exploiting process weaknesses, not technical bugs. It shows how even really mature development pipelines, when faced with this subtle mix of bad permissions, flawed logic, and perfect timing, can be turned against themselves.
Less about breaking the lock, more about finding the key left out. The elegance of the attack, technically speaking, is really disturbing because it used the very mechanisms designed to speed up and automate secure development. The real-world impact of GerriScary was, well, significant. It directly led to malicious code injection. It had the potential for widespread remote code execution, malware injection, basically a broad supply chain compromise affecting millions of users downstream globally. And the affected projects, I mean, these are crucial components, the backbone of so much of our digital life. Chromium, ChromiumOS, Dart for Flutter apps, Bazel the build engine, the ripple effect of compromising those. Injecting malicious code into the tools and apps used by developers, by end users everywhere. It's hard to even overstate how bad that could be.
So, given how serious this was, how did Google react?
Well, Google's response was swift and I think commendable. Once they identified and understood the vulnerability, they took several key actions right away. First, they promptly revoked that addPatchSet permission for regular users on their sensitive projects. That tightened up who could modify existing changes, hitting the main abuse vector.
Good first step.
Definitely. More crucially, though, they updated Gerrit's underlying logic. They made it force revalidation of patches, even if they'd already been approved. So approval labels don't just carry over anymore without challenge. That effectively killed the copy conditions flaw and closed that race window.
Ah, okay. So it forces a recheck if the code changes.
Exactly. And beyond those immediate fixes, Google also launched extensive internal audits, looked at their other open source project workflows, and they issued patches and updates across all the impacted repositories. This whole incident While really severe, it powerfully highlights how even a tech giant like Google, with robust security practices, loads of engineers, they can still be vulnerable when things like process, inherent trust models, default configurations get overlooked. It's a stark lesson for everyone, really. Security goes way beyond just the code itself.
Which brings us right to the kind of profound lesson from GerriScary, doesn't it? Yeah. What makes this truly scary, I think, is that it wasn't a flaw in the code per se, not a buffer overflow, not a SQL injection we usually talk about. Instead, it was a fundamental flaw in the process, in the trust that's just inherent in how we build software collaboratively. Attackers didn't need some complex zero-day exploit. They basically just walked through what looked like an open front door using valid permissions, even if misconfigured, and incredibly precise timing. It just fundamentally shows that supply chain threats are as much about how you code, how you review, integrate, deploy, as they are about what you code.
It's a shift, right? From just hunting bugs to looking at the whole system, the architecture, the procedures.
That is absolutely the core takeaway, and it has really profound implications for the whole software industry. We're seeing more and more supply chain attacks, specifically targeting the systems that build and deliver software, the CI/CD pipelines, the code review tools.
The tools themselves. Exactly. Because those are the trusted points of the pipeline. Attackers know compromising them gives them enormous leverage. And open source projects. They can be particularly vulnerable just because of their collaborative nature, often with more permissive default settings to encourage contribution. Plus, race conditions, like the one GerriScary exploited. They are notoriously hard to find with standard security testing.
Yeah, how do you test for timing like that?
It's very difficult. There's subtle timing-dependent flaws. They often slip past static analysis, dynamic testing, even manual code reviews. So this incident really underscores a critical need. Default permissions in developer tools must follow a strict zero-trust model. No implicit trust. Every action, every modification, every merge needs verification, re-verification. We just can't assume anymore that just because a user is logged in or a process is automated, that it's inherently secure.
Okay, so we've looked at the current landscape, all these vulnerabilities. We dove deep into GerriScary, that chilling supply chain example. It seems really clear that just patching vulnerabilities after they're found, while you absolutely have to do it, it feels like playing whack-a-mole, like we said.
That's reactive, yeah.
The real game changer, the fundamental shift we need, seems to be building security in right from the start, from line one of code, from the initial design. And that's exactly where these robust frameworks like the NIST Secure Software Development Framework, the SSDF, come into play.
Right, the NIST SSDF. Yeah, it's not just a checklist. It's really a core set of high-level secure software development practices. And it's designed to be integrated into whatever software development lifecycle or SDLC you're already using. Its main goal is kind of threefold. First, significantly cut down the number of vulnerabilities in software before it gets released. Second, reduce the potential impact if a vulnerability does slip through and gets exploited. And maybe most crucially, address the root causes of vulnerabilities to stop them from happening again in the future.
Root causes, okay.
Yeah, and the SSDF really champions this vital principle called shifting left, which basically means pushing security thinking, security activities, as early as possible into the development lifecycle. Ideally, right from the start, the design phase, requirements gathering.
Makes sense. Cheaper to fix early.
Exactly. The rationale is simple but profound. The earlier you catch and fix a flaw, the less effort, time, and money it takes to fix it. A bug caught in design, way cheaper than one found in production after a breach. And the beauty, the strength of the SSDF, is that it focuses on outcomes, what you want to achieve, not on prescribing specific tools or specific methodologies.
So it's adaptable.
Highly adaptable. That makes it incredibly versatile. You can apply it in any sector, any size organization, different technologies, different SDLC models, waterfall, agile, DevOps, whatever. And it also provides this common language, a common vocabulary for secure software development, which is invaluable, really, for improving communication and understanding between the people making software and the people buying or using it.
That sounds like a really powerful, flexible philosophy. So let's walk through the main pillars, the 4 practice groups of the SSDF that give it this comprehensive approach. How do we actually build these digital fortresses?
Okay.
First up, I see prepare the organization, or PO. What's that about? This pillar sounds like it's about getting ready, making sure your people, your processes, your tech are all equipped to actually do secure software development properly at the whole organization level.
That's right. Foundation.
It involves defining clear security requirements, not just for the software you're building, but critically for the development infrastructure itself, the tools, the environments. So that means setting up and maintaining secure environments for development. Things like keeping development, testing, production separate,
Absolutely. Separation is key.
using multi-factor authentication rigorously, robust network segmentation, limit how far attackers can move, minimizing direct human access to those automated tool chains,
Yeah.
continuously monitoring all the dev tools themselves for vulnerabilities.
Right.
It also means defining clear roles, like having security champions within dev teams, providing regular good training on secure development for all the engineers, and crucially, getting buy-in from the top. Upper management has to commit to secure development as a real priority, not just lip service.
That commitment is vital.
So thinking about it, it's like setting the stage, right? Building the right team, securing the very ground you build on, like securing the construction site, training the crew before you even lay the first brick.
Precisely. That's a great analogy. It's the foundational layer. If PO is weak, everything built on top is inherently less secure. So the next critical pillar is protect the software, or PS. This one is all about safeguarding every component of the software itself, protecting it from tampering, from unauthorized access throughout its whole life cycle.
Okay, protecting the actual code and components.
Right. It mandates storing all forms of code, source code, executables, configuration as code based on that principle of least privilege we talked about. Only authorized people, tools, services get access, only when needed, only as much as needed. It emphasizes using robust version control systems tracking every single change. Using cryptographic commit signing so you can verify who made a change and that it's intact. And code signing to ensure the authenticity and integrity of your executables, your updates, before you distribute them.
So users know it's really from you and hasn't been messed with.
Exactly. And PS also requires providing clear ways for users, the acquirers, to verify the software release integrity themselves. Things like cryptographic hashes, using certificate authorities. Finally, it stresses archiving and protecting each software release, keeping records, including integrity verification data and, crucially, provenance data, often in the form of a software bill of materials, an SBOM.
Ah, the SBOM. We hear a lot about that.
We do, and for good reason. The SBOM provides vital transparency. It lists all the open source bits, the third-party components that make up your software. That's absolutely critical today for managing supply chain security risks. So this PS pillar, it's all about ensuring the trustworthiness, the integrity of the code from the moment it's conceived all the way through distribution and use.
Right, because if you don't know exactly what's in your software, or if you can't tell if it's been tampered with, you can't really protect it, can you? That transparency is definitely key. Okay, so the third pillar is produce well-secured software, or PW. This sounds like where the actual coding happens.
This is the core development work, yes. Aiming for the absolute minimum number of security vulnerabilities in every single release. It starts right back at the design phase. Designing software to inherently meet security requirements to mitigate risks from the outset, often using practices like threat modeling.
Threat modeling, what's that exactly?
Threat modeling is basically systematically identifying potential threats to your application, thinking like an attacker, then figuring out the right countermeasures. It lets you build security right into the architecture, not bolt it on later. PW also involves rigorously reviewing the software design against security standards. And, really importantly, reusing existing, known secure software components when you can, but also diligently checking that any third-party stuff you bring in meets your security standards.
Don't just trust blindly.
Never trust blindly. At the coding level, PW means sticking to secure coding practices. Things like robust input validation stop those injection attacks. Careful error handling don't leak information. Avoiding known unsafe functions. It also covers configuring your build processes, your compilers, to improve security, using up-to-date tools, enabling hardening features, trying for reproducible builds so you know they're consistent. And finally, PW mandates comprehensive security testing, reviewing the human-readable code static analysis, testing the running code dynamic testing, fuzz testing, penetration testing to actually find vulnerabilities. Oh, and also configuring the software to have secure settings by default. Make it easy for users to be secure.
Okay, so this is really the build it right from the ground up phase, baking security into the daily work of every developer. Not just coding for features, but coding for resilience, for trustworthiness.
Precisely. But even with the best shift-left practices, the best PW processes, vulnerabilities will inevitably still pop up in complex software. It happens. And that brings us to the fourth and final pillar, respond to vulnerabilities, or RV.
Okay, so dealing with things after release.
Exactly. This pillar is about effectively identifying and addressing those residual vulnerabilities after the software is out there, and critically, learning from them to prevent them from happening again. It involves actively gathering information about potential flaws from lots of channels, your customers, users, public sources like vulnerability databases, academic research, real-time threat intelligence feeds. Organizations need clear, transparent policies for vulnerability disclosure for remediation, supported by structures like a product security incident response team, a PSIRT, and having well-defined security response playbooks ready to go.
So you know what to do when something hits.
You're prepared. Once a vulnerability is reported, it's about quickly assessing how bad it is, prioritizing it based on risk, and getting a fix out in a timely manner. But, crucially, beyond just patching the hole, RV emphasizes analyzing the vulnerability to find the root cause. Was it a gap in training? A failure in the process? A design flaw? What really led to this? And then, the most important step, updating your SDLC processes, your training, whatever it was, to prevent that same type of vulnerability from recurring. It's this iterative approach, turning every challenge into a chance for continuous improvement of the whole secure development lifecycle.
That holistic view, yeah, that seems so important. It's not just stopping the bleeding, right? It's healing the wound and building stronger defenses for next time.
Exactly. And the SSDF also talks about how this whole framework applies in today's world, which is increasingly complex, interconnected. Think about cloud models, IS, PIS, PIS, SAS. The responsibility for following SSDF practices is often shared between the cloud provider and the customer, the tenant organization.
Ah, the shared responsibility model.
Right. Which means you need really clear, explicit agreements, specifying who is responsible for which SSDF practice, how you'll check conformance. Avoid those dangerous security gaps where everyone thinks the other guy's handling it. And moreover, the SSDF isn't just some academic framework. It's directly connected to major policy initiatives, like the U.S. Executive Order 42028, improving the nation's cybersecurity. It highlights its critical role in boosting software supply chain security at a national, even international level. Ultimately, this framework really encourages critical thinking, questioning assumptions, especially about security. It gives you a flexible but robust blueprint for making security just an intrinsic normal part of the entire software journey. From just an idea to a widely used app, not an afterthought, not a last-minute bolt-on.
Wow. Okay, what an incredible journey through this ever-evolving cyber battlefield and the strategies for building more resilient digital fortresses. Let's try to summarize the really crucial lessons from this deep dive. First, the sheer volume, the critical nature of all these vulnerabilities. It just demands constant vigilance, proactive measures, not just waiting around to patch reactively. That's not enough anymore.
Definitely not.
Second, these supply chain attacks, like GerriScary. They profoundly underscore that process and trust are just as critical to security as the quality of the code itself. Default permissions, implicit trust, those subtle race conditions, they can be devastatingly exploited.
Process matters.
And third, these comprehensive frameworks like the NIST SSDF, they provide a really robust, adaptable roadmap for proactively building security into the entire development lifecycle, moving us beyond that endless reactive cycle of patching after the fact. It's about systemic change, isn't it?
It really is. Which brings up an important question for you, our listener. What can you actually do? Whether you're a developer, an IT pro, a business leader, or maybe just someone who uses software every single day. For organizations, I think it's about a fundamental shift in mindset. Actively auditing your development tools, your processes, restricting unnecessary permissions, really embracing those zero-trust principles, and diligently implementing frameworks like the SSDF. It means moving from that reactive, fix-it-when-it-breaks mentality to a proactive, build-it-securely from the start approach, where security is just a core design requirement, like performance or usability.
And for individuals.
For individuals, well, it's about demanding transparency from the digital products you use, prioritizing those updates immediately when they're available, and cultivating a deeper understanding maybe of the inherent risks, the security posture of the digital tools you rely on every day. It's this continuous collaborative cycle, really, learning, adapting, and securing our shared digital future together.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us as we navigate this world that's just increasingly run by software? In a world where software powers pretty much everything. Our banking, our communication, our healthcare, the integrity, the trustworthiness of our digital supply chains. It's not just a technical issue, it's paramount. The lessons from sophisticated attacks like GerriScary, the guidance from NIST SSDF, They aren't just technical instructions for coders or IT folks. They're really a profound call for all of us to reevaluate our fundamental approach to digital trust. So maybe a final thought for you personally. What are the default permissions, the implicit trusts, the unexamined assumptions in your own digital life, or maybe within your organization that you might need to take a closer look at? Okay, that's it for this deep dive into the evolving cybersecurity landscape and the critical importance of secure software development. We sincerely hope you found some important nuggets of knowledge today, things that will empower you to navigate the digital world with maybe a bit more awareness and confidence. And once again, we want to extend a really heartfelt thank you to our sponsor, Stonefly, for making this deep dive possible. Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. So if you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, maybe with air-gapped and immutable solutions that really stand up to modern threats, remember you can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. Until next time, stay curious and stay secure.